Salute, BookTube. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. Um, I got a video, October reading wrap up. We're almost well within the first week of November, so I'm a little bit behind. Again, I think I could have finished this a bit sooner, but for those of you who are regulars on this channel, you'll know that this past weekend was my birthday, and it was a milestone birthday. So I got a bit caught up um, with the birthday came at the end of the month. My birthday is on Halloween, and it was a weekend, so it slightly affected my reading, and therefore I'm a bit late. But here we are now, better late than never. I thought I would just recap what I read this month, and let you know what I've been what I read and what I thought. The first thing, of course, again, other regulars of BookTube will know this month, or this past month, October, was Victober. That was the major reading event for October. And as the name suggests, Victober is where the reading of Victorian literature is celebrated. So for me, there were two books that I read two fiction books I hope to read in October, or I hoped to read in October, but I'm reading it in conjunction with Steve Donahue. Those who also are regular booktubers, or most of you most of you will probably know who Steve is. He's a book critic, but he's also a very prolific booktuber. And on his channel, he was doing two read-alongs of Victorian works of fiction. The first one is Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? As you can see, I'm following his read-along, so he's a bit, he had a pause in reading, so, and again, this is a huge book, so it was never going to finish in October, and it's barely scratched the surface. So this is going to go well into November. So unfortunately, I don't really think I can talk about it except the beginning, which is like all Trollope books, just a interesting premise. So I'm looking forward to continue reading this. But again, it's probably going to go into November, maybe even December. The second one is part of this anthology that I'm reading. Also, Steve Donahue is doing it on his channel as a read aloud, or read along. Read aloud, I guess is what it's called. Again, these are Victorian literature, so they're out of copyright, so you can read them on your channel. This is what I'm reading. It's the second book in this anthology. Bram Stoker, or what Steve's reading and I'm reading along, Bram Stoker's Dracula. This Signet Classic anthology has Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then it's got a introduction by Stephen King. So again, we're reading Dracula, the second book, and again, we haven't finished it. At Steve's pace, still not finished by in October. So this will also go into November. So again, I've read Dracula before, so I know how it ends, but I think I'll talk about it perhaps for November, because again, we haven't completed it. But that takes me. Those are the fiction books that I had hoped, or I started to read in October. But as I mentioned, unable to finish in this month, so it'll carry on into November. That means what's left is Victorian subject matter, which is mostly nonfiction, biography and history. So I'll show you what I read this month. The first one we'll discuss is this one. It's called Queen Victoria: A Life of Contradictions, and it's by Matthew Dennison. And Matthew Dennison, I read a book. He wrote a book about Queen Elizabeth II, the recently deceased Queen of England, which I didn't really enjoy. It was it was really brisk, and I just didn't like it. But this was much better. Again, this is also brisk. It's a very small introduction biography about Queen Victoria. Figure I know little about. You hear about it. I hear about it. The Victorian age and the great Victorian British supremacy. But about Victoria herself, I know very little. So it was interesting to read. And again, Dennison does a good job of just taking the main highlights of her life and then putting it in. I think this is probably under 100, 200, 150 words, even pages, probably under 150 pages. But uh, Dennison pulls it off to give you a good introduction to this figure. And of course, when discussing Queen Victoria, or when historians, especially British historians, discuss who is the greatest monarch to ever reign or rule in England or in Britain, there's some would argue that it's Queen Elizabeth II, the recently deceased queen. She has a claim to be the greatest British monarch to have lived. Some will argue Elizabeth I from the 16th century, the daughter of Henry VIII, Elizabeth Tudor. Some will argue she's the greatest monarch. There's probably arguments for some kings. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, Henry II. I don't know, but Queen Victoria doesn't enter into that discussion. Now, her age, the era that she lived in was a great one for Britain. Britain had ruled the waves and was the dominant power in the world. But Victoria herself, not her character. You can't conflate the greatness of the age with the specific monarch. Yes, it's called the Victorian age, but Victoria, I don't know. I don't know how to say it. It didn't have too much to do with the greatness that was Victorian Britain. Um, yeah, I think that's fair to say. Um, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, there were she had great prime ministers. Britain had, I don't know if they were great, but they were certainly historical prime ministers. I'm thinking about Lord Peel, and at the beginning, Wellington, the Duke of Wellington, and then later Palmerston and Gladstone and Disraeli and others. I'm probably forgetting. There's another great one in there, but uh, Victoria herself, not so much. We learn about her, a bit of a temper, a little bit. It's a bit unfair to be too critical on Victoria, because she started, again, she lost her father early. She was controlled by a court in her younger days, who were all trying to use her, because when it became apparent that she was the heir to the throne, she was played around by courtiers. Um, so a difficult, I don't think difficult, she was a very pampered childhood, but difficult circumstances in which there was no father figure. And then there was no sort of male figure until she married, and she married Albert, her German husband, prince, or German prince, Albert. And that her, I don't know, incapability for the office, for the position, shows, because she started to give Albert more and more responsibility, more and more, and she was completely enamored of him. She was like, just to wrap it up, you can go on and on about this character. Although this is a small biography, so I've got a bigger Victoria biography that I hope to read, but it's just to say that she's a complex character, and this is a life of contradictions. Yeah, she lost her husband early, and that it really affected her. She went into hiding, and it's just a complex character, And then we don't even want to go into the what's his name? It's John Brown, tall Scottish, sort of ruggedly handsome. Um, I don't know what was his official position. Her valet, her she he was the valet to her horses, but then it got very serious, and then I mean the everybody speculation that it was romance. Denison doesn't refute the rumors, and it's I think quite obvious from her family correspondence that there was a certainly some kind of romantic. Uh, Again, interesting story, and I'm looking forward to reading a bigger biography of Victoria. The next book I read is by Lisa Picard. It's also on the same subject. This is called Victorian London. The subtitle is The Life of a City, 1840 to 1870. You can see the Crystal Palace over there. I think that's in its Hyde Park location. You can also see sort of scenes of London in those days. And basically, what this book is, I think I have another Lisa Picard book that's called uh, what's the author of? Uh, uh, I'm just um Chaucer. Chaucer's London or Chaucer's England. I think she has another one called Elizabethan London or Tudor London. So she writes these books kind of like for different eras in England's history. So this kind of book is not like it's a, a book cut into sections about different aspects of life in Victorian London, pretty much most of the 19th century. So again, chapter one is smells, and then the subheadings or subchapters within chapter one is cesspits, sewers, excrement, burial grounds, coal gas, slums, water closets, the Great Stink, Bazalgette, intercepting sewers, um, and then chapter two is the river. That's about the Thames. Chapter 3 is about the streets, railways, buildings, practicalities, destitution and poverty, the working class, the middle class, the upper class and royalty, domestic service, house and gardens, food, clothes and so on, health, amusements, the Great Exhibition, the Crystal Palace at Sydenham, education, women, crime and punishment, religion, and then the last chapter is death. So just different aspects of Victorian London. Good if you're interested in the era, obviously, if you let's say you wanted to make a historical reenactment, this would be a good reference guide. It's well researched, but it's read. Yeah, you've got to read it sort of in sections. It's not like a flowing kind of book. Again, as I read out the titles of each chapter, you can see it goes from one place to another. So. Again, if you're interested in the era, or if you're you want to get a feel of what life was like, and you want the details, like what things cost, what women wore, um, what did what did a funeral look like, what did a church service look like, what did they eat, that sort of thing. So good primer into Victorian. The Victorian era for Victober. And then just continuing on that theme, one more book. This is certainly a history, a well-written one. I enjoyed it. It's by Peter Ackroyd. It's called Dominion. And this is part of The History of England, and this is his volume 5. I haven't read any volume. I just started with this one because it's Victober, and I have this on my shelves, and I wanted to read it. And there is Victoria again on the cover. How appropriate it is for her to be on the cover, I don't know, but as I mentioned, the era was a great time for Britain. Her, again, a complex character. Let's be diplomatic, but this is just an overall history. If the first book, Lisa Picard's, focused on London, this took a much bigger, a larger look at England rather than just London. And again, Ackroyd is a good writer, and he's better, I think, I think he's one of those authors that are better at discussing cultural history rather than actual, like, whatever they call it, diplomatic or um, he's very good at cultural history. I think he's written books about his other books. I think he I think he wrote a biography of Dickens, Shakespeare, Charlie Chaplin, Thomas More, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound. I think he's good at that. Um, that's his strong point. He discusses it well in engaging prose. Um, but again, the only thing I didn't like about this is nothing to do with the author or anything like that. It's just me. This is very much a history of England rather than the British Empire, which was a global empire. So this is, if you're English or British or you like English or British history, this will be good. But it focuses too much on Britain, and again, for me, I don't have much of a skin in the game. Again, for those who don't know, I'm in the heart of the Middle East in the United Arab Emirates. So history of England, the reform movement, and it's interesting because the era, it was the peak of Britain and English dominance. But again, you have to enjoy the subject or have an interest in the subject, or perhaps be from the UK to really, I think, to really enjoy this book. So that's my only thing against it. Um, Now there's two more books I read. Now these last two have nothing to do with Victober. These are other reading projects I have going on that I have been going on. Excuse me. Regulars on the channel will know. One of the reading projects is I've got 4 books by this author, Michael Burleigh, and I read last month. I read this one, Michael Burleigh's Earthly Powers. The subtitle is The Clash of Religion and Politics in Europe from the French Revolution to the Great War. So basically, an intellectual history of 19th century Europe. This is almost like a sequel. The subtitle of this one is Religion and Politics from the European Dictators to Al-Qaeda. And there you can see, even from the back, and you can see that's the German dictator Adolf Hitler. It's quite clear, even though you don't see his face. Again, this is an intellectual history. I read this with a pencil in my hand, a lot of notes, a lot of arguing with the author. I enjoy doing that, but and it's a big book. I can talk on, and I put, I mean, I do have, I've put some post-it notes, and I can discuss. And the first thing I'm going to say, it says here the subtitle Religion and Politics. I think this should be. It should be Christianity and Politics from European Dictators to Al-Qaeda, because most of the book, 90% of it, is Europe, the church during World War I, the church during in the interwar period, the church during World War II, the church after World War II, the church with the demise of the fall of the Berlin Wall, Poland and Pope John Paul II, and all of that good stuff. Only the last chapter does he get to discussing 9/11 and Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and the attacks of September 11th and Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic terrorism. Again, mostly Christian. Michael Burleigh. It was quite clear in in this book, but certainly when he comes here, especially with contemporary issues like the Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 and all of that, it's quite clear that he's right-wing. He's a conservative, that's for sure. And it shows the bias isn't there. He doesn't hide it. But again, there are things, there's a lot of ideas I can argue and discuss. Maybe I'll just go a couple. One of the first ones I saw was in the preface, the preface, excuse me, not the preface, the preface, the introduction, I guess. There was one line that just and this is right in the beginning, and it threw me off, and it soured it for the rest of this long book. He says here, he's just discussing about the rise of, or he's discussing Muslims in Europe, because this is mostly discussing, it says religion and politics from the European dictators to Al-Qaeda, and it's again, it should be mostly Europe. No, not too much discussion about the United States, North America. So, but here, just in the introduction, when he's talking about, there's a message he gives to Muslims in Europe where he says anyone with those views, and the views are sort of extremist Islamic views, anyone with those views is irreconcilable with our civilization and should take the opportunity to leave before Europe's history repeats itself. And because just before that he was talking about the Holocaust in Europe, the Holocaust, the genocide of European Jewry. And then he goes and he talks about Muslims in Europe, and then he says anyone with those views, let's just say religious Islamic views, because he's pro-religion, but he's pro-Christian religion. Anyone with those views is irreconcilable with our civilization, should take the opportunity to leave before Europe's history repeats itself. What did you mean by that, Michael? Should leave if in case Europe's history repeats itself. Before Europe's history repeats itself, are you saying that the Christian majority in Europe will do some kind of Holocaust against the minority Muslims, or would it be the Muslims who are doing the Holocaust? Again, not at the preface of the book is. It was a weird one. It was a strange one. I hope. I mean, maybe he can clarify it, but. Yeah, it just goes on. There's other things I can argue here, on and on. There was another quote. Basically, what Michael Burleigh is trying to do, he's an apologist for the church. And the church, or all of European society in the mid 20th century was, let's just say it was a controversial time, especially the interwar years and then World War II and the position of the church. So a big bulk of this book is Michael Burleigh defending the Pope Pius XI and then Pius XII against talks of collaboration with the Nazis and with the fascist dictators of the period. But I mean, he tries, and I don't want to say that, the Catholic Church was in league with the Nazis. No, that's not fair, but this is just Michael Burleigh. When you have, when you're at the fair and you have a hammer and then there's something and you have to beat it, and then once you beat that one, another one comes up, or you've got many fires and you're trying to put all the fires out, because he's trying to defend the church, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, but then it's just, I mean, the Vatican had the Concordat, a sort of agreement with Mussolini. The Vatican had an agreement with Franco's Spain, a very nationalistic Catholic dictatorship. Same thing with Salazar in Portugal. And then Adolf Hitler comes on the scene, and Adolf Hitler comes into the scene. Austrian corporal becomes the Führer of Germany. Austria itself also had a similar to Spain, a very Catholic. It doesn't discuss it too much, and I'm not an expert, but. And then during World War II, trying to defend the indefensible in Slovakia. In Slovakia, there's a priest, a Catholic priest, actually becomes the fascistic leader of Slovakia. That's the Tiso. Cardinal Tiso, again, a cardinal of the Catholic Church. And then the other one is Croatia. The Ustaše in Croatia, led by the Pavlich, fascistic, pro-Nazi dictator in very Catholic Croatia, which maybe did less than the others, less anti-Jewish behavior, but the Catholics in Croatia were pretty much more concerned with the Orthodox Christians in Serbia and to an extent the Muslims in Bosnia. But Michael Burleigh tries to defend. He makes an admirable effort. This is well researched, but it's just, I mean, can you defend it? I don't know. But there was, not just to pick on the Vatican and the Protestants, because here he has an interesting quote. He says, he's speaking about Protestants and specifically about U.S. American Protestants. It says U.S. Protestant Christians have so far U.S. Protestant Christians have so far not been asked to conduct a, quote, moral reckoning for what their co-religionists did or did not do in Germany more than 70 years ago. Perhaps the fact that the conservative Protestant Christians are stalwart supporters of Israel, while the Catholic Church has to weigh the interests of Arab Christians, may have something to do with this. Which is an interesting point. The Catholic Church, yeah, there are Catholic Arabs, so they have to tread carefully. U.S. evangelical Protestants are saying, well, hey, look, we support Israel, so, don't call us anti-Semitic. But they've been very quiet about German Protestants massacring Jews in Europe during World War II. And then, I mean, isn't America like 75% Germanic, like German-Irish? But anyway, American Protestants didn't have to apologize in any way for the Holocaust in Europe because they said, well, we support Israel. But now Israel is also engaging in genocidal behavior. And where's the condemnation from the evangelical Protestant Christian community? In fact, they are probably the most stalwart pro-Israel lobby or group in America. So they're 0 for 2. They didn't do anything, or they didn't speak out against German Protestantism, their fellow German Protestants during World War II. And now against Israel, they're also silent. So they're not innocent themselves. But again, I mean, I can go on and on. You talk about the communists, the Orthodox Church, and what they did, and what the Soviet Union. What else was there that was? He made the quote again. There was another. He mentions he discusses. It's a large book. I mean, I can go on and on. I think I'll leave it there. I've been controversial enough, but this book again, you make a whole video that can go hours and hours discussing this because it's very sort of intellectual history and ideas. So it's fascinating book. Again, Michael Burleigh is a author I argued with a lot. There's a lot of me arguing, but I'm gonna spare you. I'm gonna have mercy on you, and I'm not gonna get too. I think I've given a flavor by what I've already just discussed, and I think that's enough. Enough for this sweet little reading wrap-up video. And speaking of wrapping up, this is the last book that I read. Probably the most a book that opened my eyes to an area of the world I don't know very much. Again, regulars of this channel will know that I went on a trip to the Caucasus region, which is a region in that makes up three countries in sort of northern Asia or the far east border of Europe. Those three countries are the Republic of Georgia, the Republic of Armenia, and the Republic of Azerbaijan. And I visited the Caucasus, and when I was there, I kept buying books about the history of the region. And now I have a bunch of books, maybe like 10 of them, and I don't need 10 of them, so I want to read them and get them out of my library, at least the ones that don't need to stay in my library because I don't have enough space. So I've been reading those. I've been reading them for the past, it's been maybe now 4 or 5 months since I started this channel, really, almost 6 months. But um, so I've been reading them. But again, as I mentioned, the Caucasus, those three countries, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, are in the Caucasus, and they can be termed the Southern Caucasus. This month, or this past month in October, I read this. It's by Oliver Bulloff, and it's called Let Our Fame Be Great. Oliver Bulloff. The subtitle is Journeys Among the Defiant People of the Caucasus. Now, this book is interesting because, well, again, there's a map. There's a map right here that might be helpful. This is the Caspian Sea, and this is the Black Sea. You've got Turkey, and you've got Iran, and then you've got Russia here. And these countries are right in the middle. They're between two seas and three very large countries, and it's they're in a very geographically difficult position. Added to that are mountain ranges, so it's very difficult to reach this part of the world. And added to that is it's a mixture of people, Muslims, Christians, just a hodgepodge of people. This book, Let Our Fame Be Great, isn't about, you can see here, it says Azeris and it says Georgians, and then there's Armenians over here. It's not about those Caucasus. This book discusses the people of the Caucasus to the north of the Caucasus, the people that are now very much part of Russia. So here you're talking about Circassians, you're talking about Chechnya, you're talking about Dagestan. So the northern part of the Caucasus, or the Russian Caucasus, the parts of the Caucasus that are very much part of Russia. I'm gonna move the book, the cover, just to make this a bit easier. Now, why are they part of Russia? Again, this map is the title of this map. It says the mountain peoples of the Caucasus before the before the Russian conquest. And you can see all kinds of people, and this, especially this very big one of Circassian people. If you go to the end paper, at the end, it says mountain peoples of the Caucasus present day. And as you can see, there's much less of that big yellow blob we saw, and these have retracted a lot more, the peoples here. So what happened between the Russian conquest, which occurred really in the 19th century, and what happened today? And that's what this book is about. This book is about Russian penetration, Russian invasion, Russian conquest of this region. Sorry, I should put the book cover back on because it's plain. Russian just brutal penetration into that region. And I know we have a booktuber, my good friend, and if you saw my last video, she got me a birthday package, so I'm supposed to be nice to her. But she's actually from this region. Of course, she's I think well, she told me what she was ethnically, but this area is pretty much all Russian now. It used to be Circassian, and the Circassian were a Muslim mountain Caucasus people, and they were driven out by Russians because they were thought of to be agents of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire. So they were driven out, and they went across the Black Sea, and most of them now are living as refugees, or they've pretty much, there's very few Circassians left in Russia. They've pretty much adapted to their adopted countries, of which they were forcibly expelled by brutal means by the Russian army, both the Russian Tsar's army and then later the Soviet Union. And then this book also goes through the not just the Circassians but also the Chechnya, and what happened in Chechnya recently in the 90s, the Russian war against Chechnya, what happened in Dagestan, the mountain people, the Turkic mountain people, what are they called? The Avars, the Ingush, the Ossetians, the Dargins, names more people probably don't know. I knew very little about, but now I know much more thanks to this book. So it was really interesting. Again, I have a lot of quotes. I can go on and on, but this video is already long, so I won't quote from the book too much or at all, because there's a lot of background that needs to be given. But again, this region, this sort of what they call the Riviera, the Black Sea, Russia's Black Sea Riviera. There's the city of Sochi, which hosted the 2014 Winter Olympics. Was it the Winter or the Summer Olympics? Anyway, it's discussed here by Oliver Bullock, the author, young author. At the time, he was young. I think he wrote this book when he was in his 20s. So it has a sort of travel writing, sort of journalistic tone to it. But yeah, it's it's interesting because the Russians, and there was a good quote here, but I put a sticky note, and the sticky note fell out, and now I can't find the quote. But basically, what Bullock quotes, I'll paraphrase it. He says, when Russians compare themselves to Europeans, Western Europeans, they find them they are not as European, or maybe I don't want to use the word backward, but they're less. They're less. I don't know what the word is. I'm going to be controversial here, but I mean the quote. I should have read his quote, but basically they're behind in their, I don't know, democratic evolution when compared to Europe, Western Europeans or Central Europeans. But European Russians, when they compare themselves to these Islamic peoples here in the Caucasus, they definitely feel a superiority, because these people are mountain people. They're tribal. They're very, again, backward is not the correct word, but they're very, even primitive is not. They're just not as, I don't know, urbane, let's say, as let's say Russians living in St. Petersburg or Moscow, or Europeans living in London or Paris. So these Russians, when they were entering, and these were Christian Russians, at least during the Tsar's time, were coming and saying, these are backward Asiatic Muslim peoples. Let's kill them. Let's forcibly relocate them to other parts of the Russian Empire, mostly Central Asia, Kazakhstan, etc., or drive them away to Turkey. But Bullock calls it a genocide. He was clear that it's a genocide. And it's interesting because these genocides that happened in the 1860s, the 1870s, when you compare that, there's, of course, the controversial Armenian genocide, but that's much later, so not really in the purview here of this book or this period. But then on this book, the British Empire, Gladstone, I think, was specifically, if my memory is correct, there were big allegations at the same period that the Ottoman Muslims were massacring Christians in Bulgaria and in Serbia. But they were the Orthodox Christian sort of Slavic peoples were doing the same in the the Black Sea region and the Caucasus, basically Russian Caucasus. So again, but that part isn't really spoken about. Again, the story when Britain gets involved in Crimea, and they get involved in calling for independence for Bulgaria and for Serbia and for uh, Romania and all these countries, because apparently the Muslim Ottomans were subjugating and massacring Christian Europeans. It was the Russian Christians who were doing a lot of massacring of Muslims in the Caucasus. So again, I'm trying to be neutral. I know I'm very controversial, especially with these last two books, but I'm just they're there. You should read the books if you have a chance. I recommend Let Our Fame Be Great. Again, it's a part of Russian history, a part of the Caucasus, a part of the world that I knew very little about going in. But again, what happened in this part of the world is overlooked in 19th century histories, early 20th century histories. What happened during World War II? What happened to the Chechens? The war in Chechnya. The war in Chechnya is what made Vladimir Putin. It made his name. He made his name. He came to power. He gained popularity after his firebombing, pretty much, of Grozny. And then the last section of this book is titled Beslan. There was a school shooting in Beslan by Chechen terrorists. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should read this book. It's a fascinating part of the world. Makes you reinterpret your views on history and your assumptions. So it was a fun read. Fun isn't the right word. It was an interesting read. One that I learned a lot. A lot of stuff that even I didn't know about. I like to think that I'm some kind of history whiz, but anyway, this video, again, despite my best efforts, has gone too long. So I'm gonna cut this. I'm gonna end this. I'm gonna thank you for being here if you made it this far, and I'm gonna wish you a happy November. Thank you, BookTube. Salute.